Wanna be the greatest of all time. Yeah. Wanna be the greatest of all time. Yeah. Wanna be the greatest of all time. The greatest.
Yo, what's going on, y'all? How y'all doing, man? Y'all know what we doing. We back with another one, man. It's your boy Rob One, and this is Sparking Conversation. And y'all know what I do each and every week. I get up here and I chop it up with some of the world's most interesting people. And I mean that literally, right? So look, before I get into the show, I also got to do the same thing I do each and every week too, is let y'all know that the people who download the audio version of this podcast are the real MVPs. I definitely appreciate y'all. Y'all on Spotify, y'all on Apple, y'all on Amazon, y'all on everywhere that y'all get y'all audio podcast from, or y'all stream your podcast from. We're there. And y'all rocking with us, man. Thank y'all so much, man. Downloading the audio version, man, and listening to us. All my people who are on the roads and be traveling and y'all want something interesting to listen to, I definitely appreciate y'all. All right. So now, tonight's show is going to be definitely interesting, right? Because y'all know it's taboo in our community, especially when it comes to being a man. Now, listen. There's a lot of people out here who figure they know what it really means to be a man, right? They have their idea of what it is to be a man. Now, I understand that a lot of different people have been going by just the example that they've been given in their life, right? Like whoever the person is in front of them and whoever the people that they see, even if it's not right in front of them, but they're just in their atmosphere, whether it be outside or whether it be just wherever they go to school at, or if they play an organized sport or something like that. Whatever the male figures that's in their life, that's what they may see and that's what they may emulate. But what I do understand is that when it comes to having things that happen to you as a man that shouldn't happen to you. And what I mean by that is that we understand the difference between what happens when people are accepting of a lifestyle versus people who have been violated in their life. And we're going to talk about that today because tonight, I have an amazing guest on tonight, right? And this guy is going to sit up, he's going to tell his story. And in his story, I know it's going to be a lot of men that can relate out here. And what we want to do is to make sure on Sparking Conversation that I have those type of conversations with people who I know that when we can get this message out to help other people. Remember, it's a lot of things that go on in our community that we deal with, and it's one thing that we don't get a lot of help with, and it's called mental health. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable with talking to a complete stranger or feeling like a complete stranger can actually really give them the information they may need to move forward. But sometimes just being able to tell your story to get it out of you, and you don't know how often you help save a person from jumping off that roof or jumping off that bridge or kicking that chair from under their feet. Now, realize that this happens each and every day because things happen to people that mentally they can't really get over. Right? And then there's those of people who, because of certain acts that have been done against them, it caused them or allowed them to go into a certain lifestyle in order to accept those things that has happened to them. Because for some people, they felt like that's what it was supposed to. But that goes on with anybody, right? In this world, we all go by things that we're just accepted to have. Now, let's think about this, for example. So often that we need to judge people by their track record, right? It's called a report card. That's what I call it, right? We check people's report card. What do they have? What's their grades on their report card? We talk about on the report card of life. Now we got all these people out here. Now I'm not, and you know how we do in Sparking Conversation. It's not a political platform. We just talk about everything that go on in life, right? Because it ties into what we're going to talk about today. And it's talked about where people have this ability to make you feel like it's one thing and knowing good and well on the other end that they got a whole nother agenda. And see, the signs of recognizing these people is where I feel like in our community we lack that. We lack that ability to have that sense, that thing that goes off inside of us, where we could be able to understand that there's a bunch of people who act like one thing, but they're not. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. And some of us are too trusting with the people that we say we love, with people who come off as sheeps. Because you got to think about it. This whole political thing that's going on, that's just crazy. I'm not even into it. I don't even want to get into the whole color thing, because technically we have all been raised to go by what somebody has told us who to look at and how to look at them, but not in what reality is. Because when I look at myself in the mirror, I don't see the color black. People have had told me that the way I grew up in life is that I had to identify as a color. But a color does not give me no type of nationality. It doesn't give me no type of race. It doesn't give me no type of identity. That's a color. And I'm not that color. If somebody was to say, yo, what color am I? And it was on a test and they wrote that down, it would be wrong. But for me to have to identify as something that somebody told me I had to is crazy. So I don't understand the whole argument of why we can't judge a book by, the pages that are inside of it. And we know that when it comes down to Kamala, everything that happened with her, she got a book that we could open up and see the page. Now on Google, you can't right now, of course not. But for those people who know, they know it's the pages inside. Listen, you still the same person. You just got a different position. We not falling for that. We not playing with y'all. And I'm just trying to tell y'all while we out here that we got to be paying attention to the people that are the wolves in sheep's clothing, right? Because we have a whole lot of people who are victimized by people who look like something, but they're not that. And we're going to talk about that. Shout out to the people who click the links in the descriptions. Don't forget, I always got to make sure I give y'all a shout out too, because that's very important. Y'all know in the description, in the links, we have everything in there for y'all to, that they go ahead and check out. And we have so many different products and different things that are just meaningful to life. Like we have the affirmations kit that's in there for anybody who is looking to just be able to have those things on contact, where you can pull them up each and every day, each and every night, or whenever you're thinking about it and you need some words that you need to read of encouragement, or you want to share that on your page and make sure that whoever's out there looking can get that word of encouragement. Yeah, we got that for y'all. Click the link in the descriptions and the whole nine. So look, I'm gonna bring my guest up, right? Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that this conversation really goes the way that it's supposed to go, right? Because it's one of those conversations, like I said, it's really taboo. There's not a lot of men that's willing to have this conversation that we're gonna have tonight, right? Because it comes with a whole level of embarrassment, because first of all, you think about the violation, and then you think about the fact of what you are and what you represent, and how inside you feel because of what another person was able to do. And look, we don't want to overlook the fact that it happens to girls and boys, and it always happens to people when they're younger as well. We hear the stories about people who go to prison and things happen to them, but we still got to understand that a lot of things that's happened to people who are carrying around guilt and shame that has been placed on them based on what another adult has done. Yo, it's some terrible people out here in this world, man, and they don't look like it. They said it. They had a statistic that popped up not too long ago and said that each and every person in this world walks past within a day or within a week. They said, I think it was in a week, you walk by at least 25 serial killers. So think about that. So if you walk by that many of them, think about how many people you walk by that are child molesters, right? Or people who take advantage of children, or people who take advantage of the elderly. Think about how many of them you walk past as well. Right. All right, bet. So I'm gonna bring my guest up real quick. We're gonna let him chop. We're gonna chop it up with him, and we're gonna get into his world, man, and see what's going on. Let's see, my boy, Mr. Michael Chapman. What's going on, sir?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for having me here, Rock. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Yeah, no, no problem, man. Hey, look, it's a pleasure having you on, man. Because I want to be honest with you. Whenever you said that you was willing to be a guest on the show and you shared your story, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Because look, I've always wanted to talk to a person with a story like you, right? So
Right.
before we get into too much, I want you to introduce yourself and also tell the audience why you're on the platform tonight.
Well, I'm Mike Chapman, and I'm a survivor of incestual childhood sexual abuse and familial sex trafficking and ritual abuse. Also, a survivor of sexual assault by clergy when I was a young adult, and uh, took a spiritual journey towards recovery. And in that, I've had to battle anger, PTSD, anxiety, codependency, other addictive behaviors, including pornography addiction, which I just celebrated my 6th year anniversary from being porn free. So that's something you struggle
Okay.
with, I can relate. And I'm currently now a recovery life coach and brain spotting provider for both Polar Life Consulting, which is my group, which is, yeah, there, and husbandmaterial.com. And I also host my own faith based podcast called Healing for Male Survivors with Mike Chapman on all platforms. And I interview, like you are with me, male survivors of sexual trauma and those who serve them. And that's available on most platforms. I've been married to my wife, Beth, for over 33 years, and we have 2 adult children, and we live in Eastern North Carolina, a couple hours away from you.
There it is. There it is. And look, and that's why I said today it's going to be very interesting because, child sexual abuse, trauma, PTSD, incestual, things that you describe or the adjectives that you use to talk about your story, these are all things that are familiar to a lot of people, right?
Right,
But most of it is all taboo because there's so many people who grew up with these things happening to them by members of their family, and when they did speak up, the other members of their family didn't allow them to actually, express themselves fully enough to where something could be done about it. Right.
right.
So let's talk a little bit about your story. Let's start from the beginning. So, at what age did you start to understand that something just wasn't going right with the way that you were being treated by adults that you knew?
Well, that's just it. Most of my abuse, I was sedated. It was by my father. I was sedated for a lot of it. So all those memories got blocked out until I was an adult. And I was 30 when I started remembering the childhood abuse. But like I said, as a young adult, I was sexually assaulted by a minister, the senior minister of the church I was going to. He sexually assaulted me, and I'm going, "Whoa, where did that come from?" And but when he tried and started touching stuff that he wasn't shouldn't be touching, something inside of me knew what was going on and like screamed inside of my head, "No, make him stop." It's like part of me knew what was going on, and I got him to stop, and I was able to get him to leave. He was in my own apartment at the time. I was living by myself in college, and got him away. Um, but it was another 10 years before I was able to uh, recover those memories of being abused as a child by my own father. And then um, by that time, I already had one child, had another after that, and then busying with parenthood and life, didn't have a lot of time and energy to look at that. And I just turned 60, and a lot of, I'm old, and a lot of men, when they get empty nest, then it kind of gives you the free time. You can actually start working on your own stuff. And that's where I was. And a few years, 2019, just before COVID hit, I started looking at things. I saw a documentary on child abuse, and they mentioned different resources. So I looked into that and found out, okay, I wasn't alone, that there's help out there. And they said, hey, you probably have PTSD. It's like, Really? What's that? I mean, I'd heard about it, but they gave me a website and I looked and it's like, okay, everything that they described was like my whole personality. It's like, I think I must have PTSD. And I never put
Wow.
that together. It's like, well, what do I do? Go find a therapist who works with PTSD. Oh, okay. So I found a therapist that works with PTSD and he helped me through a lot. And in that process, we were able to uncover that I was also trafficked by my father. I had some spotty memories that didn't quite make sense. And someone put together and it was what they call a boy swap event. This I grew up in Oregon, and this is where this was from. So, uh, and basically a whole bunch of men bringing a whole bunch of boys to a get together to have a big man boy orgy for young boys. Boys were sedated for the most part, or mostly sedated, where they could control them, heavy mind control, and have a whole weekend orgy. And looking back, it's like, yeah, I would remember like going to bed Friday night and waking up and it was Monday morning. Wait, what happened to Saturday and Sunday? What happened? And it's like, yeah, it wouldn't happen every weekend, but stuff like that would happen. And so only looking back, it's like, oh, yeah, all these pieces started to come together and make sense. And I got confirmation with my therapist. Yeah, this stuff happened. And after that, it's like the floodgates open. When you repress a memory, it's like all those memories are locked up in a vault, like a big old bank vault. But how I describe it, it's an old vault and it's leaky. So
Right.
your mind thinks all those memories are locked up in there, but stuff leaks out and messes with you until you can actually figure out you even have a vault and then get that vault open so you can deal with all that stuff. But until you do, all that
Right.
stuff just starts leaking out. So the thing I was dealing with pornography addiction and the stuff I was looking at had nothing to do with what my father did with me. It was all this trafficking stuff. And I got free from porn. I saw a therapist uh, help me get free from pornography, and then it was about 2 years later. Then I uncovered this, and it's like, oh, that's why I was typing all this stuff in the search bar because it was all related to all that trauma I experienced.
Gotcha. So, all right. So there was a lot of things in there that I want to try to let's expound on a little bit. So, you said that you were sedated a lot. Do
Mm-hmm.
you? So your father sedated you. So was your mom around at all?
From the stories I've gotten, he pretty much got her drunk, so she would have no idea. Or it was like these events he would take me to. It was a weekend camping thing, and it was just a weekend away. That's how it would be framed, so he could take me away to these events. But before that, um, I was the baby of the family. I was the youngest. He convinced my mom to not breastfeed, and then he would help with all the night feedings. So that gave him access. This was in the '60s. Men didn't do that back then. They hardly do it now, but at least it's somewhat normal now. But back then, it was unheard of. A man volunteering for night feedings, but he did. So he would have access. So he convinced her to not breastfeed, so it could be bottle feed, and then he could put something in the bottle, spike it with something. Whether, yeah, I hate the taste of beer and wine, so I'm thinking that was used often. But cough syrup, all those things. Back then in the '60s, I mean, there was a lot of drugs in that stuff, so it would not be hard to put someone to sleep. And I remember hearing a story where I had really bad flu that put me in the hospital for a couple weeks, and then I came and I didn't recognize anything. And I'm pretty sure, looking back, it's probably alcohol poisoning or some kind of overdose to whatever I got spiked with, and that's why I ended up in the hospital. A very young child. But yeah,
Right.
so I would not remember, and then he would get my mom drunk, so she would have no clue,
And
and he could do
so,
what he
all right,
needed. Yeah,
and so, okay, and all right, and
uh,
this was your biological father.
yes. And the funny thing is, she never wanted kids in the first place. He convinced her to have children because she didn't even want children.
So,
So she,
wow.
yeah, yeah. So if you get down to it, the only reason I was even conceived was to be his plaything. And the same thing with my sisters. I had two older sisters.
Right, because I was going to ask you, did you have any other siblings or whatever? So he
Yeah.
did the same thing to all three of y'all?
I'm assuming yes. My older sister, she was in an abusive marriage, got help, got free from him, but then he went off the deep end, stalked her, and then did a murder suicide. She was only 25 when she died. And
Wow.
then my other sister, I think we were like just they call it Irish twins. We're slightly less than a year apart. So I think we were so
Right.
close in age, and she was a female, and they shared a bedroom. He had all of a sudden when I was around, he didn't need to be with her, maybe a little bit when she was very young, but then he had me, and I was in my own room, so he didn't have to like battle for privacy or whatever because I had my own room. So he could pretty much do what he wanted. So I'm pretty sure she got spared a lot of it. And she says she has very few memories of childhood. So we don't know if she actually got abused or was spared. Don't know. Yeah.
And so, with that being said, you felt, and then you said that your dad would pass you around with other men. So in
Yes.
Oregon, this is a thing that really goes on out there, where a bunch of men get their male.
Nationwide, it is a thing. It is a thing.
Uh,
It's in the shadows. This is back in the 70s before the internet. There was
yeah,
no internet. They'd have they'd have kitty porn magazines, and they'd have classified ads on the back. Hey, you want to get together and meet up and do some of this stuff? Hey, here's a number. They'd have meetings. There's a group called NAMBLA, North American Man Boy Love Association, that's been around since at least the 50s, if not earlier. And that's a group, they do lobbying and so forth, trying to make child abuse legal. That man versus boy sex to be legal. And so, yeah, that's a huge thing. It's been around. And yeah, they have these events all over the country. And you think trafficking, and it fits the definition of trafficking because children can't consent to sex. So, and my father he didn't get paid to share me, but he got the benefit of coming to these events and having his way with all the other boys who were present. So that was the exchange of value. So that meets the definition of trafficking. And you hear sex trafficking, you think it's these like Asian kids or Mexican kids or Indian kids or whatever being brought in, or people going there. And no, for mine, Oregon in the 70s, hardly any black men. It was all white, a little bit of Asian, a lot of Mexicans, but there for these events, it was all middle class white men with little middle class white boys, all sedated, and they're all getting forced sex on them in these events.
that is
And
crazy.
yeah, and I've talked to people who this has happened to them in other parts of the country. So this is not just one state, it's all over. And it still happens.
And it still happens today, and
Yep.
that's because of the people who probably are involved when it comes down to that. So when it comes down to that and you realizing it's your dad, what type of relationship did you have with him uh growing
Well,
up once you realized it?
I aged out at age 8, and soon after that, he left and divorced my mom, and then pretty much cut off all contact with us. He would see us, I think, the first year maybe 3 or 4 times, and then it was birthdays and Christmas, and then it was just not at all. And I have
Wait,
not spoken to him in like 20 years.
so you said you aged out at 8.
Yeah,
So this was happening to
yeah.
you ever since you were how old?
Therapy brought up, yeah, it started about 7 months old.
Are you got to be kidding.
And
Gotta be kidding.
infant abuse is very common. People don't talk about it. They don't like to talk about it, but it happens a lot. It happens a lot. And baby's not going to tell anything. Baby can't even talk. Baby can barely keep his head open. Happens all the time.
And I don't know. And this is what bothers me so much is because, you know, when it when it happens to people and you hear a lot of these stories where it's like an uncle or, a step something
Right,
that
right,
is the abuser of a child that is going through different things. And that's why I'm so protective over mine, right?
right.
And
As
it,
am
and
I.
it's and it's because of those particular reasons. None of that. I've happened to grow up in a family where that didn't happen, right? The men were really men. But I'm not saying that it's nobody else's family wasn't like that. But in some cultures, I know a lot of men really think that what they're doing makes them a man, even by taking
Right,
that from another man, right? You know what I
right.
mean? And they feel
Exactly,
like it
yes.
makes them more of a man or, gives them more of the strength or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Just
Right.
barbaric when it comes down to the act. But,
And,
you
and
know,
that's exactly, if you, FBI has gotten all kinds of literature from the NAMBLA group, and that's some of their mottos. It's like, okay, yeah, you're teaching them sexuality. That's what they're doing, and it's to make it, yeah, it's healthy for the child to have these experiences. That's their how they encourage this activity with their membership, saying how healthy it is and how you're educating the child and helping them with their sexuality, helping them to become a man, all of that stuff, and that's some of the things that they use.
yeah, but like if once a person realizes that, wait, hold on, that doesn't necessarily that don't make you a man at all. That makes you a predator because
Right,
actually it's a child, period. The fact that it's the same sex, that could be classified as something else, right? Like we know
right,
that could be classified as
right,
something else. But the fact that you are abusing a child, whether it's a male or a female, that is not something that you're saying that you can help. You're helping yourself because the child themselves are not getting any type of pleasure from being violated by a grown person,
right,
having their way with them, in that particular regard. Like you got to think about that. A lot of these people, when it ain't theirs, they do whatever to it. They abuse it. They
right,
demolish it. Like we know, like when it comes down to all type of things, not just in this particular regard, but just in things in general. They say like whenever a child is just given something and they didn't earn it, they don't take care of it. It's like they do whatever to it. They throw it
right,
around, they step on it, they pick it up again, they put it back down again. They do everything they can to it because they didn't have to earn it. It's not theirs. So they do whatever they want. So the fact that young boys are being groomed this way by adult men who are trying to justify it by saying what it's doing for another person who you didn't give you the consent to do that. What
right,
if they didn't want to be a man in that way? That's what I'm talking about.
right. And
Man,
the children are not old enough to consent to sex. That uh, human brains don't even fully develop until what, age 25.
at
So
least.
even that, yeah, that all those decision making things, connections in your brain aren't fully developed until 25. So yes, legally we're an adult at 18, but all that teenage stuff, yeah, we can't even conceive of a lot of this stuff or really understand what it means or get pressure to do it. And that's why I think so many laws like cut it off at 16 for consent, and even that's kind of a gray area. But the fascinating thing, a lot of these perps know, uh, if they didn't really have a choice, a male or female, they will choose male because boys don't tell. Because the stigma, if you share your story, oh, that happened to you, oh, you must be gay, or even worse, oh, you're probably going to be a child molester too, and you're not safe around any children either, which is a big
Right.
misconception that uh, very few uh, abusers, uh, very few men who were abused become abusers. And I think it's the same as the main population. And out of those men who were abusers, it's actually a rather small percentage to that admit to being abused themselves.
Well, that might be based on, like you said, the admission, because
Right,
they always say hurt people hurt people. It's very.
right,
Now I'm not. I don't know, right? I'm just saying, like, just by based on the conversation, I don't know. Like, these people are taught this. Like, okay, like, even if you think about the motto of the organization that you just hollered out,
hmm,
even for them, they're justifying what they're doing to children by saying it's helping the child. That's something
right,
that they're teaching people
hmm,
in order, or
right,
indoctrinating people to think a certain way. So
right,
there's no way that the people who are that organized wasn't taught that this was happening. Like you
right,
just said, like what you just said is not something that a lot of people know. I've never in my life heard of that, which you know, that whole camp and that whole scenario. Like, I never heard of that. I wouldn't even put
right,
that together for men, because what I be always thinking about when it comes to dads, like, first of all, it's already a stigma about dads not being in their children's lives. That's number one, and that goes across all races. They don't talk about other races as much as they talk about certain ones, but that goes across all
right.
races.
Yep.
Right. All right. Back. So even with that being said, the one thing that the dad is supposed to do, regardless to whatever people think about when it comes to finances, is to protect. That's number one. Up there
Hmm.
alongside of whatever you're going to contribute to the household to make sure the household keep running if you're not running it all by
Right,
yourself. The point is, though, to protect. So whenever the protector is the abuser, that really causes people, I don't know, but just from everyone that I've ever talked to that have dealt with this scenario, it made them either one or two things. It either made them gravitate to the act that was done to them, because that's how their mom was able to justify what was going on. Because unlike you, a lot of people were not drugged. They had to go through this with a
right,
sober mind, without the ability to repress the thought, because it's
right.
happening to them in a real time scenario where the only way they can forget it is either with drugs and all that other stuff, and then that
Right.
don't help, right? But they
Exactly.
do
I work with
everything
a
they
lot of
can.
clients who do that exactly what you're saying, that they remember everything and they've gone through everything and have had to deal with those memories. And
Exactly.
having carried all those memories all this time, they might be able to file it away or kind of push it down. But do remember that you can pull it back up. It's like, oh, yeah, this is what happened. This is boom, boom, boom. And yeah, horribly traumatic. And then
Right.
me later age, it's like, wait, what? This stuff happened to me? Really? It's like, oh. And then, yeah, pieces start forming together. So, and it's all crazy. It's all horrible. And it is very much life altering. But
Yeah.
for boys, like I said, boys don't tell that. so many, especially the older boys who were abused, that our bodies as males, it doesn't take much. You touch in the genital area, there's a physiological response, whether it's a good touch or a bad touch. Your body doesn't care; it will respond.
That's right.
So, and the perpetrators know that, and they will say, "I will like show pornography or do something to get things going," and say, "Oh, look, yeah, you got a hard on, you've got an erection." Well, do you even know what that is? Well, I can't send you home in that situation. I got to take care of it. They will use that against it, or you say, "Oh, see, you must like that because see, you have an erection," and convince the boy that he is a willing participant when he's really not. They will use that. And part of the grooming process is to convince your victim that they're not a victim, that they're a willing participant. Even at a young age, you convince them that they are a willing participant. And it's a long time, oftentimes later on in adult looking back, wait, you mean what happened to me? That wasn't right? No, that wasn't right. That wasn't normal. No, that wasn't normal. And
Right.
oftentimes for those victims, after they have children and the children reach that age when they were abused, and they look, wait, if some rando stranger did to my child what that dude did to me, then it hits home
Yeah.
because they realize that is so wrong. And then it hits what happened to me, that was so wrong. And
Yeah.
yeah, so many stories I've heard where, yeah, your firstborn reaches that age and something snaps and then it all comes together. It's like, oh, that was not right. And that's why
No.
so many men, they say on average, it takes men 25 years on average from the time that the abuse stops before they disclose to anyone what happened. 25 years.
And some people, it's probably will never be disclosed because of
Right,
how embarrassing the violation is, because like you said, it's the thought process of their sexuality comes into play,
right,
because somebody
right,
has taken advantage of them in a way, and like you said, an older adult that play mind games with a impressionable child, making them feel like what was going on was normal, and then that they supposed to do these things and you're supposed to feel this way, and you're not. That's why I say it's very hard to believe that the person who does this wasn't abused themselves or was not
yes.
taught to be that. It's
And I'm
very
not saying
hard
it
for
never.
me.
My own father was abused. That, from what I know, I talked to one of his co-victims, an extended family member who was also um, abused by him at a young age. Apparently, there was my grandparents had taken in a boarder to make ends meet for about a month, and he stayed in the boys' room. My father had a brother, and so he stayed in the room with the boys. And then after about a month, like very little warning, you have an hour, you pack your things, and you're out of here. And that extended family member said it was soon after that, like a few weeks after that, that's when the abuse started happening to that person and to other extended family members. So
Yeah,
chances are, yeah, he was probably abused by this, and my grandparents caught him in the act of abusing him and probably his younger brother.
exactly.
So
But because
yeah,
for that to be that organized, it's definitely uh something, because it's got to be exclusive, right? Because, like you said, it may not be a monetary exchange between the men in order to, trade off on their sons, but in order for them to have this place, money had to be spent. Money had to be
Right.
spent for the lodging. Money had to be spent for the food. Money had to be spent for whatever they use
Oh
to,
yeah.
make y'all not remember. And I'm
Yep.
being very careful with the choices of the words I use because we want to make sure that we can get the story out more so than we cannot
Right.
based on certain words because we know, exactly what I want to say, but I'm not saying it because, let's be frank. There's a name for a lot of the things that they give people. Because
Yes.
a lot of it has come out now with what was going on in the entertainment industry with one of the most famous people in the world. They keep attaching a certain type of drug to him and what was
Right.
used against males at certain parties and other things in order for them to be able to get violated and abused and it not really show
Right.
physically. You get what I'm
Exactly.
saying? Because they was able to
Yes.
give them things that they give to animals to make
Hmm.
them not feel what needs to be done to them. And
Right.
if you put that on a human, that's even more so than it is
Hmm.
if you're thinking about a horse. If you think about a full grown horse, that's what thousands of pounds, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
The
Yep.
average human, they 100 and something, maybe 200 and something pounds average if you kind of put it in those
Hmm.
ranges. And so if you think about that, so no, these are all things that you're saying is things that all parents need to know as these signs of things that you're saying. Basically, psychologically, what's happening about leaving your children, male children, around other males. You have
Right.
to be in that position, and being that it happened with your own father, that's different because I will almost be saying I need people to watch me because I'm a dad myself. The
Hmm.
only difference is people, would know me better than that. First of all, second of all, you know what I mean. I'm willing to go all out for mine. You know
Right.
what I mean.
Right.
So that's just a totally different thing. But I would want everybody that's watching this show right now and who's going to watch the playback to really make sure you cover your male children, right?
Right.
And you single moms out there, I don't care. Like I get it. You need to have your own life and you need somebody to love you too. If the things don't work out with who you have children with, but listen, I don't care what it is. If you can't have your own until your children get old enough to be on their own or old enough to have a source of identity where they know right and wrong based on what's taught to them, listen, you got to keep them men
Right.
away from them. You have
Right.
to, everybody come off as a nice guy. Everybody come off as the perfect person. And the whole time they've been abused and they not saying nothing. The way that they deal with it is by abusing somebody else. The
Right.
victim like to become the person that is the victim. Because look, how often do we look in different societies where, all throughout history, where when the abuser finally get the opportunity to abuse, they do it 10 times worse than the person, than what was done to them because of the built up anger. So the fact that
Right.
you didn't like you was able to break that curse and not move that along your children. What do you have? Boys or girls? I know you said you have.
I have one of
Uh,
each, and they're both. My daughter just turned 30, and son is his late 20s, and they're both great human beings. I'm proud of
okay,
both of
dope.
them. But they're moved out, and they all have their own lives and doing really well.
Well, that's great because the one thing about it is good that they don't know their grandfather. Um,
Right.
I don't know
Never
if they
have
do or
had.
not.
Never been able to meet. That was something I refused. My mom remarried and twice, but the man she was married to, I call him mom's husband because they started dating when I was already in college. So I was never like
Right.
yeah, mom's husband. He was their grandpa. He was the only grandpa that they knew. So, and
Okay.
he was a good man. They both passed several years ago, but um,
Okay.
yeah. For going back to what you said, for moms being concerned about their sons, listen to them. Same thing with the girls. Listen to them. So this isn't stranger danger. That's what they tell kids. Stranger danger. Someone's gonna like come in a van. Yes, that happens, but that's like less than 10% of sexual abuse. Mostly it's people who are known. Whether yeah, I see that. No. Uh, I see that answer. Yeah, did my father ever get caught? No. He's still alive. He's in his 80s, living just outside of Portland. He's still out there. I filed police reports, but yes, statute of limitations is weird and no proof. And but they have his name, so in case ever something else pops up, they've got a little bit of history. So, um, but what I was saying, listen to your children. If they say, like they used to go to uh, Uncle Bob and Aunt Karen's house, but all of a sudden, yeah, no, I don't want to go there anymore, Mom. Well, you love them. It's like, well, maybe something's happening now. Maybe one of their kids,
Mm,
or maybe one of the parents. And that's an important thing to know. Boys can be victims and women can be perpetrators as well. So it's not just the guys, women can be
right.
perpetrators as well. So it's like, yeah, oh, you don't want to go there anymore? Listen to them, and they might need not even have the vocabulary to explain it to you, but there's signs and they will let you know little hints. Yeah, I really don't want to go there anymore. Um, Things like that, that some kind of change, those are hints that something ain't right. And that's when you really have to be
Right.
attuned to your children and listen to them. And when they tell you something's going on, you need to go, oh, wait, something's going on. And yeah,
Yeah.
new people or someone who takes an interest who may not have kids of their own. And especially if you're a single parent, hey, someone's volunteering to take care of my kids and give them a little extra attention. That sounds wonderful. And that's a little less on my plate. They may be a wonderful person, but they also might be a predator. I'm not saying everyone who's in that situation, they might be a wonderful person, but that's part of the
No,
grooming process. They don't only groom the child, they groom the adults around the child. So
exactly.
that way, if it ever comes out that, yeah, this person did something, how dare you speak bad about this man? He's done so many nice things to you and to our family. And they groom the adults so if an accusation is ever made, they will not be believed.
Yeah. And that's the saddest part about being a kid, right? Is that
Right,
sometimes kids make things up and then there's the times that they're telling the truth. More so or not though, more parents are gonna have to be proactive with taking their children to the doctors and actually having them checked for these particular things because they can check to
right,
see if certain things have been broken in order for them to know that somebody has been penetrating your children. And in
right.
that regard, that's when it has to be all hell break loose around all the males. Because the one
Though,
thing about the women abusers, right? Like, let's take those for example, because you're absolutely right. There are women who abuse children, but there are women who abuse children with men, right? Grown
right,
adult
yes,
women and grown adult men abuse children together. So it's not
yes.
like we don't understand that. The only difference is with the woman is like she's not penetrating anybody, right? So her abuse is a little bit harder to detect when it comes
Well,
down to what's going on.
she does have fingers and she has a
Yeah,
tongue.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so yeah, there's all kinds of ways where, yeah, a
She
child
could get
can be
she could get violated,
penetrated.
like the children could be
Right,
violated, yeah. And
yeah.
and even with that sense though, as much as the men though, yo, when you think about the act of pedophilia coming from a man, not saying that one is better than the other. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, men in the regard of being the aggressor, being the person
Hmm.
that is actually, doing what will be considered all the work. That's just foul to just take advantage of a child in that way. And then for
Right.
you, man, I feel so bad. A good thing that you're dealing with it and you're able to help other people. So we talk about purpose on this platform a lot, and not to say that what you had happen to you was supposed to happen to you so you can have this purpose, but out of what happened to you came this
Right.
purpose, if that makes sense.
Right. I'm
And
a man of faith, and I've heard God does not cause pain, but He will not waste a pain. So if you experience something, He will make use of it for good, even though
exactly,
the pain wasn't good, and but He won't waste that, and He will allow that to be used for good.
which is the one thing that you can ask for out of all the things you go through in life, because outside of the what you've gone through as a child and what you've had to overcome as an adult in regards to that, it's so many things that we do go through as children that we all suffer from PTSD. It's just
Right.
that some people don't recognize it as that because they've been
Hmm.
able to suppress those memories, right? Of what
Right.
happened to them in their childhood. Not even about the violation, just about the dysfunction that they might have grew up in, or
Right.
just about the mindset that was placed on them that had them only thinking no further than, working at the drive-through window, at
Right.
somebody's fast food restaurant. Not saying that we don't need people who work these jobs, because we do. I'm saying that the fact is not that. It's just that people aspire for that. And the fact that we have generations upon generations of people who have grown up in the projects. We got three and
Right.
four generations of families who are grown up in the projects. Their great grandmother was in there, grandmother, them, their children in there, like in the projects, living off the system. This is
Hmm.
what people aspire to be because of things that was put into them, saying that this is what you are, this is all
Right.
you are, this is what you gonna be. And in your life, you got to think about it. Your dad was telling you, as well as all those other dads out there, that their son, that this is you. This is what's supposed to happen to you. This is why you feel this way. Let me show you something to make you understand why you feel this way. It's not me, it's
Hmm.
you. I'm just going to help you, which is the one thing that we notice that everybody falls for when it comes down to everything, whether it's politics, whether it's, education, all these things that people say, hey, I'm not, it's you. I'm just going to help. I'm going to be the person to help you. But really, this is what you want. I'm just going to be the person to help you. The whole time they helping themselves, right? And it's always a thing that we don't ask from people. Like, what do you get out of it? Like a
Hmm.
child can't ask this person who is telling them, "Hey, you're supposed to feel this way. I'm supposed to do these things." They say, "Okay, so if you're supposed to do these things, what do you get out of it?" Like
Right.
the child can't grasp the concept of being able to ask that question. Okay, you saying all these things. All right, so what do you get out of it? Oh, I get the the satisfaction of being able to help you, but I didn't ask you for that help. So what do you get out of it by you forcing yourself to feel like I need your help? But there, you can't have these conversations as a child because you got a person that's in front of you who you're told that you're supposed to respect. You respect your elders,
Right.
right?
Right.
Listen to your elders, and all these other things, and then boom. Now we wonder why children are so disrespectful nowadays because they've been
Hmm.
traumatized as children.
Right. And one thing, going through my own recovery, so many men think it's only happened to me. I'm the only person this has ever happened to because, like I said before, boys don't tell. And
Right.
but they do research. The CDC in Atlanta, Centers for Disease Control, they keep stats on all of this. For girls in the U.S., 1 in 4 females have been sexually abused or assaulted by the age of 18 in the U.S. 1 in 4. For boys, 1 in 6, 1 in 6 males are sexually abused or assaulted by the age of 18 in the U.S. That's all races, all socioeconomic. 1 in 6.
Yeah,
But
and
boys
that's
don't
that.
tell.
No, and you're right. And that's the thing. It's because of the shame of it all.
Right.
It's the emotional thing about, even if you're telling somebody it's right, it's just something that rings off inside of them that lets them know that, nah, this don't feel right. This not right. I know what you're
Right.
telling me, but this not right. But then there's those who have been taught that, and they do think that it was right, and they decide to live a certain lifestyle. And you got people who they said are born a certain way, when a lot of people are abused into a lifestyle, right?
Right.
Because they've
Right.
been told, that this is the way it's supposed to be. And you never know, in those regards, it changes the way a person thinks about themselves.
Right. Right.
Let's think about it. Like, you really got to overcome that violation that happened to you in your life to feel like a man again. I mean,
Right.
let's think about it. There's so many guys. Like, I saw an interview not too long ago about a guy who got out of prison, who was talking about how he was essayed in prison, and it was around somebody that he was cool with. He was chilling. It was, and what they were
Hmm.
doing was they were able to make their own version of alcohol in there. And
Right.
what
Yep.
happened was he got caught
Yeah.
in,
Oh,
sharing alcohol with this person, and got him to a point where he was in an intoxicated state. He took advantage of him, violated him, and then went and started telling everybody in the prison that he violated him. It
yeah.
wasn't just like it was a thing that he was doing and trying to keep it on the low. He wanted people to know that he committed this act against another person.
Hmm.
And that is what I'm saying about the whole gladiator mentality of, like, what your dad and that whole crew of people that's in that organization that you was talking about. That's the
Hmm.
mentality that they have, right? To take this from other boys and other men in order to make them feel more masculine, or more to make them feel more of a thing. And
Right.
and
Right.
that's what's the saddest part about it, because it's a mental disorder. But what how often can we have that real conversation with people to say, yo, like, with your dad, like you say, he's still alive and he kicking it, and he 80 something years old, and there's people who haven't as lived as long as him, they've done none of the things that he's done, and they're not here no more. So
Right.
whenever people talk about karma and all these different things about karma, like, yo, like, they gotta go ahead and take that out their vocabulary, because God's timing is on His timing, and when He want to do whatever He gonna do to a person. We, all
Right.
of us out here yelling karma all the time, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
your dad violated you before you were a preteen. Now we hear
Yeah.
all the things that happen to the young
Before
boys.
I
Like,
could even talk.
you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
walking around here as a child, not even, you know what I mean? Like, understanding that somebody is
Yeah.
violating you, like, as a baby.
Right.
Like, this guy, like, and then your mom, like, I know you said they're not here, so, God rest their dead. I don't want to talk negative about them. Let's just say, like, when it come down to, because I can't really say nothing nice, so I'm not going to say it based on your mom personally. But let's just say to all the mothers out there that know about these. I don't care. Like, look, if you don't want to have children, then don't have them, because it's still the burden of
Hmm.
responsibility still fall on you when things happen to your children. Like, it
Right.
still fall on you, whether you wanted to have them or not. That don't have nothing to do with it. Run a stoplight and let a police see you running a stoplight. They're gonna give you that ticket. They don't care if you late. They don't care if you ran it because you had this or that going on. They don't care about that. They're gonna give you that ticket. You're
Right.
not exempt from the law. So you're not exempt from your children just because you said this is not what I want to do. You're just as much as to blame as the person who did it, period.
Right.
Because you gotta
Right.
watch them. You gotta pay attention to your children. And you gotta pay attention to the person in your life.
Yeah.
Right? You got to. Like, you cannot, because even with the fathers, you gotta do the same thing. Right? You fathers, you got to pay attention to the women in the lives of your children as well too, because they be out here doing all kind of things to your daughters and your sons as well too. They've been violated too. So
Right.
it's just got to work vice versa on both ends. I'm one that, I'll be honest with you. I keep my son all the time before I really allow him to be staying with other people, even when it comes to family.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Keep him with me.
Right.
So
That's
that's
good.
it. And it's just a thing. Like if I can't do certain things, then I just can't do certain things. When his mother got things to do and she got business to handle, I'm with him. I'm like, yo, because I have that thing inside of me that just will not allow it. Like, yo, and I'm gonna ask questions. And when he get old enough to, well, he can't really, he getting there where he's starting to talk and stuff like that. But outside of that, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna have these conversations because I am not playing when it comes to sports. When it comes to any of these different things where other men are gonna be around, I'm gonna be on it. I'm not playing with them. And that doctor, like I'm not playing with that either. Like they gonna be getting checked because like we can't play
Right.
with it, right? We
Right.
cannot. We cannot because
So
it changes people's lives.
keep in mind, you mentioned taking to the doctor, trying to find evidence. I think for girls, you've got the hymen. That's more physical evidence you could find. For boys and young children in general, very flexible. It would take a lot of damage to show any physical signs that someone would be abused. It would be very difficult for a doctor to determine just by doing a physical evaluation, unless it was immediately after, to find specific scarring or some kind of physical evidence that a boy had been sexually assaulted. That'd be very
Well, I mean,
difficult
I
to
get
find
that, but then
physically. Right.
I get that, but then I still don't see how it's not some level of soreness. Now, the one thing about children is that when something bothers them, whether it hurts or it itches or whatever, they point to it. They don't have that
Right.
ability to overlook it. They're gonna let you know if they
You know,
can't
if they
sit
do
down.
get some kind of STD, then yes, definitely. Whether they're
Or if
itching
they
or a
saw,
rash or
or
whatever, yes.
yeah, or if they saw, like if you changing their Pampers, like especially at the age that you were talking about, you had to be in Pampers when
Right.
this started. There had to be another
Mhm.
person changing your Pampers. Like there's gonna be some discoloring. It's gonna be something where you're
Right.
gonna be able to tell that this ain't right. Because think about when it comes down to children and diaper rash, like they get diaper rash off of just having a pamper on a little bit too long,
Right.
right?
Right.
That they've already soiled. So you're gonna and when it come down to diaper rash, you got to put all this cream on it because they be
Right.
bothered. They don't even want to sit down. So like when it come down to that, I don't know. It just depends on how people
Right.
pay attention to their children. I can't
Right.
necessarily say, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just am not fully agreeing with that particular thing that they can't
Right.
figure it out
And
with a
you got to
boy
do the whole
because
picture. So with what they're doing, you need to, if they're able to communicate something, because it's often more emotional things, or like no, or they'll
yeah,
cry. And it's like no, I don't want, or they don't want to touch. They don't want this person to hug them. All these different
right,
signs. You have to like
right.
look at the whole picture
Yeah, you're right.
for sure.
You're right. They
Yeah.
do. You do have to pay attention to everything. You're right about that. Not just
Yeah.
what you think may be going on, but just the fact that how your child responds to certain people. You have to pay attention. And that's one thing about it. We can't force our child onto somebody that they don't really want to rock with because they pick up on vibes. Like children are very spiritual because they don't have that. They're not taught not to be yet.
Right.
So they
Right.
have all their spiritual faculties in the beginning. So when they really don't rock with somebody or don't want nobody to pick them up or do all that, you got to pay attention to it. You might have to make an excuse for it. Like, oh, it's okay. They just woke up, or oh, that's just how they do. You can do that all day, but you can't. You shouldn't force your child into, getting past that if they're not feeling that for somebody.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that goes with
Exactly.
adults still wanting to have a life because most of the time when you're passing your child off outside of just normal family who have that rotation. You know, uncles and aunts, nieces and
Hmm.
nephews. Like, there's certain families that have that rotation. I know I grew up in a family like that, right? We
Right.
had that
Right.
rotation where we would be over each other's house and stuff like that.
Right.
The oldest of the bunch would be watching the youngest of the bunch while the adults go out. Like, we had these type of scenarios growing up. That's
Right.
why me and a lot of my cousins are so close, because we grew up that
Hmm.
way, right?
Right.
All right.
Right.
But then you have those scenarios like we're saying, where you have that person who is a predator,
Right. In the middle of that. Yeah.
who is in the middle of all of that right there,
Hmm.
and then having to pick that predator out of the lineup of all that's in the mix, right?
Hmm.
That's the one thing that is the toughest part for a person to really figure out. That's why
Right.
knowing your children, paying attention to your
Right.
children, is the most important,
And
right?
then
We got to.
teach your children, they call it body autonomy, which means you are in charge of your own body. So if grandma or Aunt Martha or whatever comes and wants to give you a big old sloppy kiss, I don't want Aunt Martha to give me a big old sloppy kiss. You can tell her no. It's okay. It is your body. And Aunt Martha will be okay. If she's upset, you can have her come to me and I will tell her no. If she doesn't want a hug, she does not have to have a hug. And Aunt Martha might go off in a huff, but you know, that child needs to know this is my body and I can say no and let them know that it's okay. Not you do whatever he says, he's in charge. Haha, I'm in charge. He has to do what they said you have to do what I say. So, you give them
Yeah,
a
nah,
power over their own body to let them know, just age appropriate, saying, yeah, you can say no. If Uncle Joe tries to hug you and you don't want him to hug you, you can tell him no and it's okay.
that's right. You're right about that. Be able to empower your children
Yeah,
over what is theirs, and that
right,
autonomy that they carry, that's theirs, and they definitely are in control of that. So you hit the nail on the head with that. People,
right,
teach your children, about what boundaries are, and
right,
how, to make sure that they respect their own boundaries, even if other people don't, because other
right.
people probably won't. Like you said, it was a clergyman that disrespected you, right? Which is
Yes,
supposed to be a person of the cloth, a person of the faith, which is another thing about when
exactly.
people grow their children up in organized religion as well too, because they be the person who you feel like is the holiest, that is the biggest demon. That's another thing that we have to make sure that we have the proper balance. That's why I always talk about, when it comes down to being a physical person and the spiritual person, having that balance is more important than what religion that you subscribe to.
Right.
Because you can
And
be under a religion, but if you're not
it
going to be the
it,
person
it
that you claim to be,
right, and it's all religions. I've heard stories from
yeah,
not only Catholics, they get all the press. Mine was Methodist. It's Baptist, Southern Baptist, um, uh, Mormon, Jewish, all kinds of backgrounds. This stuff happens. All these different religious groups, child abuse, child sexual abuse happens everywhere.
everywhere.
Perpetrators will find a group. Same thing with the scouting, with athletics. It happens,
Yeah.
and time again. People will find an in, and they'll figure out the loopholes so they can get into a system, and they can get what they want.
Which is to abuse your children.
Yes,
Because a
exactly.
lot of times these people do have children of their own, but then most of the time they don't.
Right,
Right. So
right,
that's why they justify themselves with being able to do it to someone else. And that's why I feel like your story is so powerful. And me personally, I really want to be honest with you, Mike, man. I hope your platform, not hope, I know your platform is going to grow and continue to grow, right?
right,
Because they need more men need to have a safe space where they could
right,
come and they could have these stories and tell their particular scenario that happened to them. That way, for those parents who are the protectors of their children, who adopt that mindset, not just the provider, right? Because we got a bunch of parents who love to throw their children in daycare too somewhere and let somebody
Right.
else raise their children for them because of them saying that they got to pay a bill or so. So we not talk. We people got to do what they got
Hmm.
to do. I'm not judging. Don't take that the
Right.
wrong way. Of people that are watching that are parents. I'm not judging
Right.
you. What I'm saying to you is you got to know your children, and you have to pay attention to them. You have to. You have to ask them questions. You got to be able to examine your children as well too. Don't be afraid to examine your children. Pay attention because, like I said, it be the people who you think that's not that do, and we ain't with it. Like I'm not with it on my end. We pay attention to mine. I even make sure that people understand. Like, listen, his mom, yes, okay, but me, you gonna have to. You really take me out. So you're gonna have to make sure that you really ready to jump all the way out the window if you violate mine, because you're gonna have to take me all the way out. But that's
Hmm.
just because of the fact that, I'm not ever going to put myself in a position where a child should be harmed if they around me.
Right.
Right. And I expect that from somebody else. And if you violate that trust, it's a wrap, because the children are innocent. And that goes for sex trafficking too. Because the things that group did to y'all, you right. That was definitely sex trafficking, whether they gave y'all back or not. They
Right.
still moved y'all around like y'all was some little
Hmm.
pieces of a chessboard and then
Right.
gave it on
Exactly.
back.
Right.
Right. And then the attitude of the person, like just the thought of your dad, like his mindset, of how he really viewed y'all, or even you, to be the person that's supposed to carry on his legacy, that he really viewed you as nothing less than, you know what I'm saying, something that he
Hmm.
could get his sexual needs off of with.
Right. Right.
And you able to turn that around and not allow that to be a generational curse is amazing as well too. So you got to be
Right.
thankful, whatever your spiritual connection is, because I know you said God, but I also know that a person of God violated you as well too. So the fact that you
Yes.
still keeping your faith is amazing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because there's a lot of
And
people who are atheists right now because of.
right. And that was a struggle, battling my own faith, but realizing, yeah, he's just an evil man who took on that role so he could have access. And it had nothing to do with God allowing it to happen. God doesn't allow bad things to happen. We have free will, and people can choose to do bad things, and people do choose to do bad things. And I had to
That's a
come to
fact.
terms with that. It was a battle for sure. And that's the horrible thing when it's a clergy member abusing you, because it's not only the physical and the sexual, but it's the spiritual abuse.
On
Because
top
yes,
of that,
he represents God to you, and it's as if God was doing those bad things to you. In your mind,
right?
it's pretty much the same. So having to overcome that, it's especially harmful, even above and beyond the other abuse. And that's one thing why I have this platform, why I share my story with people like you, with other podcasts, is I want other male survivors to know that they're not alone. Just like I thought I was alone, you are
Right.
not alone. And what's important to know, and I end it with my podcast all the time, the abuse was not your fault. So many
Facts.
times we take on the shame and the guilt. And like I said earlier, a lot of perpetrators will try to convince you that it's not abuse or that you are condoning it. You may have had physical pleasure because your body physiologically responded to the abuse. You may have had erections, you may have had ejaculations. That's normal. That's how our bodies respond to touch. It still was not your fault.
Right.
The abuse was not your fault. And that's the whole theme of my podcast, is the power of story. That the more
Right.
men who can share their story, that they went through these horrible, horrible things, other men will hear that and realize, oh, I'm not alone. And this
Right.
guy's not crazy. He has it kind of put together, and he's sharing his story. So I was so thankful for the Me Too movement that happened just before COVID hit. If you remember that, all these
Yeah,
ladies came
definitely.
out. Then that started the Men Too movement. So I know Tyler Perry, he was already very active for like 10, 20 years coming out with his own story well before
Right.
that happened. But with Men Too, men like Terry Crews talk about being sexually assaulted as an adult. All
Right.
these other celebrities coming out sharing their stories. And it was hearing these stories during that time that inspired me. Oh, I'm not alone. I can get help. And that got me helping. And now I'm sharing my story. And I know people who've heard my story and they've gotten help from my story. And they're starting to share their story. And other people are hearing their story and they're getting help. So it's this big old snowball effect, the power of
Facts.
story, that men need to hear from other men that, yes, this horrible thing happens. And it's not your fault. And you can find hope. You can find healing. It is out there. You are not alone.
Facts. So look, I was gonna ask you before we get out of here, anything you want to leave with the audience, but that right there was perfect. I think that right there is a message within itself. Like to make sure that the men out there in the world know, all y'all that's watching tonight and those of y'all that's gonna watch the playback, men, understand that whatever happened to you wasn't your fault. It doesn't change who you are as a person. We understand that you have to battle in your mind, but just know that it doesn't make you less of a man because you've been violated by one. Just understand that
Right.
you do have a purpose in life. And if you would be willing to tell your story, Mr. Mike Chapman is here. He has a platform dedicated to allowing men to come on and tell a story. He does it to the point where you can be anonymous as far as your visual is concerned. You could go straight audio with him if you want to, because if you don't even want people to see you, because you got to really get this stuff out. Mike offers that when it comes down to his platform. So
Right.
don't be afraid to reach out to Mike and let him know that you have a story to tell. You want to get these things out of you that happened to you. Hopefully it'll help another man or female, right? Because you got to think about it. The sexual abuse happening to females too. Like he said, one out
Right.
of every four girls before they're 18 and one out of every six boys. So which means that it's happening to girls more often than it's happening to boys. So we want to make sure that people who have had this situation, they have a safe space. You also can always come on my platform, but understand I'm not a niche based platform, so we only talk about certain things, but we surround certain things and topics. I'm always open to talk to people who got interesting stories. So you can always reach out to me as well. But like I said, in this particular regard, make sure y'all reach out to Mike Chapman and, connect with him and just put yourself in a position to tell your story, because the audience that he has and the people that he's already had on this platform, they all need to continue to hear and continue to be able to grow and move past the violation that happened to them in their life. Because a lot of
Right.
these men, these things did not happen to them as adults. These things happened to them as children. They've been living with this since they've been understanding what their memories are. So we got to give them, some type of credit for being able to deal with this and still be able to move forward. But some people are having a hard time being able to adjust with different relationships with people because they're dealing with this thing in the background. So, all of y'all that's watching tonight, thank y'all for jumping on. Y'all know I appreciate y'all. Mike Chapman, before we go, just give them your social media handles where they can reach you at so people can actually either hear other stories of people that have been through things or want to reach out to you themselves and be able to tell their story with you.
Certainly. Polar, Polar, liveconsulting.com. And that's also my page on Facebook, facebook.com/Polar Live Consulting. Again, POLAR, like a polar bear. And on my website that I offer paid recovery life coaching, but I've got a lot of free resources on there as well. Not only my podcast episodes, but we've got a chat room and I've got other stuff going on specifically for male survivors. There are also lots of other resources out there for men, even more for ladies out there who are dealing with abuse. But my focus is on men because there's not a lot out there for them,
Right.
for us as survivors. But yeah, there
Definitely.
there is hope. You can find it. Lots of resources out there for both men and women.
Gotcha. So make sure that if you are a victim of abuse, remember it's not your fault. And there are more people out here like you, and you can find hope. And you can find help, in order to help get you through mentally, right? So you can be able to keep being productive and move forward in your life and enjoy the life that you were meant to have, because these things that happened to you as children was not meant to shape who you are. It's not no reflection of you. It's only a reflection of the person that did this to you, that did the violation. So remember that. All right. So y'all that's watching, thank y'all so much. If this is your first time watching, remember, just like us on YouTube, and subscribe to us. Hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we go live. I go live each and every Tuesday, right, at 8 p.m. And like I said, we talk to some of the world's most interesting people. I have such an amazing lineup going out for the next couple of months. I want to make sure that y'all do not miss an episode, because like I said, if it can't help you personally, it'll help somebody you know, I promise y'all. So until next week, I want y'all to make sure y'all hold it down out there. And remember, if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. So until next week, all of y'all, this your boy Ron One signing out, and I'm gonna just